What happens when a 19-year-old black tech prodigy boards a first-class flight only to be told she doesn't belong? What if the flight attendant trying to remove her didn't realize the young woman in seat 3A wasn't just a passenger, the majority owner of the airline? Meet Naomi Carter, a self-made millionaire whose revolutionary algorithm changed the future of aviation. She's brilliant, driven, and determined to build the kind of company her parents never had the chance to work for, one where discrimination wasn't hidden behind customer service smiles or coded policies. But when Naomi decides to board a flight under the radar dressed like any other student, no private jet, no media entourage, she ends up facing a moment of raw, unapologetic racism. A white woman demands her seat. A senior flight attendant insists she belongs in coach. And then, in front of a cabin full of silent passengers, Naomi does something no one expects. She pulls out her phone, shows the airline's internal executive directory, and reveals the truth. I'm Naomi Carter. I own this airline. You work for me. What unfolds next is not just a personal reckoning, but a high-stakes corporate war exposing a decades-old system built on exclusion, silence, and image over integrity. Hidden emails, offshore accounts, secret alliances within federal agencies, and one woman fighting not just for justice, but for transformation. But here's the question that will haunt you. What if the discrimination you thought was just a bad experience was actually policy? Could one act of defiance bring down an empire built on quiet complicity? Could one voice uncover an industry-wide conspiracy? And in a world that tells young black women to stay quiet, stay grateful, stay in their lane, what happens when one of them says no and refuses to move? If you're ready for a story of courage, power, and the fight to dismantle injustice, you're in the right place. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a wake-up call. Let's begin. The first-class cabin of the Apex Air flight from Chicago to Los Angeles was cloaked in a quiet hush. Crystal glasses clinked gently. Conversations murmured low. The scent of citrus cleaner and new leather hung in the air. Then everything stopped. 19-year-old Naomi Carter stood in the narrow aisle of row 3, phone in one trembling hand, a wave of disbelief passing silently between her and the uniformed flight attendant glaring down at her. "I said," the woman hissed again, her voice clipped and cold, "move to economy where you belong." Across the aisle, a pale, older woman in pearls and tailored silk watched expectantly, clearly assuming Naomi would comply. But Naomi didn't move. She simply stared. Her heart thundered as she pulled up the Apex Air executive team page on her phone. A single tap brought her own profile into view. With a breath, she raised the screen, turned it toward the flight attendant, and asked evenly, "Lauren, is it?" The woman blinked. "Excuse me, I think you should meet someone," Naomi Carter said, her voice steady now. "That's me, majority owner of Apex Air, your boss." Gasps rose from a few seats. Heads turned. A businessman 2 rows back lowered his copy of the Wall Street Journal. No one moved. The moment hung there, suspended in pressure. Let's rewind. At 17, while her peers obsessed over prom and SATs, Naomi Carter had been writing code that would alter the face of aviation. Her algorithm, a staggeringly complex system that predicted weather delays, optimized fuel consumption, and rerouted traffic flow scut delays by nearly 40% for every airline that adopted it. Within months, the biggest carriers in the country had lined up to license the software. They thought she was just a brain to be bought. They were wrong. Naomi didn't want royalties. She wanted roots. She wanted change. She had grown up watching her father, decorated aerospace engineer, passed over again and again for promotions at Apex Air, despite outperforming his white peers. Her mother, once a celebrated flight attendant, had quietly resigned after years of whispered microaggressions from colleagues and customers alike. Naomi had never forgotten the exhaustion in their eyes. She didn't dream of joining the system. She dreamed of transforming it. Using her patent earnings, she built a network of shell companies, acquired voting shares through silent investors, and slowly bought her way into control. Within 18 months, Naomi Carter quietly secured a 51% stake in one of America's most established airlines. Only one person in the world knew: Celeste Monroe, a veteran strategist in the aviation industry and one of the few black women to ever sit on Apex's executive board. She had spotted Naomi's potential at a high school science fair and had guided her from the shadows ever since. Observe first, Celeste had warned on their last encrypted call. Experience what they do to people like you before you try to fix it. And so, Naomi Carter, hoodie-clad and wearing jeans, booked a first-class ticket on her own airline under a false name, no assistant, no security, no entourage, just a college student heading west. What she didn't realize was that Lauren Keating, the senior flight attendant working first class that day, had her own history. 15 years with Apex, 12 separate complaints of racial bias, each one buried. She had joined when the company proudly embraced a classic American image. It was code. Everyone knew it. And she wasn't alone. Far down the corporate chain, Graham Kingsley, Apex's COO, had ensured things stayed that way. Old money pedigree, deep political connections, and a deep belief that he was the company's rightful leader. He'd been fuming ever since a shadowy investor bloc seized majority control. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the investor was a teenage girl from Atlanta. As Naomi settled into seat 3A, the man beside her offered a polite nod before turning back to his thick binder of legal documents. A firm name on the folder caught her eye: Blake & Rowe, LLP, Civil Rights Division. Curious, but she didn't have time to dwell. As boarding neared completion, her phone buzzed. "We know who you are. Stay in your lane or regret it." The anonymous number sent her stomach into knots. She looked around, trying to spot who might be watching. No luck. Then the cabin doors sealed shut. The plane hummed with the energy of takeoff preparation as Lauren Keating glided down the aisle, hair in a flawless French twist, smile reserved for the older white passengers. "Mr. Davidson, always a pleasure. Champagne for you. Mrs. Peters." She reached Naomi's row, and her expression shifted instantly. The frost was unmistakable. "Ticket," she said, hand extended. Naomi offered it. "Good afternoon," she said, evenly. Lauren barely looked at the boarding pass before her lip curled. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" "Yes," Naomi Carter replied, pointing to 3A. "It's right there." "These tickets can be confusing," Lauren said slowly, as though speaking to a child. "This is first class. Economy is toward the back." From the seat beside her, the man with the legal folder looked up. His eyes narrowed, but Naomi didn't flinch. "I know where I belong," she said. Lauren gave a dramatic sigh, turned, and disappeared. But she was back within minutes. "This young lady seems confused about her seating assignment," she said loudly to another attendant, a man in his 30s, warm-eyed and Latino. He looked at Naomi's ticket and nodded. "She's in the right seat. Lauren." Lauren's jaw tightened. "Very well," she muttered and stormed away. Naomi exhaled. The plane hadn't even taken off, and the patterns were already clear. She jotted mental notes, policy changes, accountability, new training protocols. The real work was beginning. Then, another disturbance. An older woman with perfectly curled hair, glinting rings, and a sharp Chanel coat stood at the front of the cabin. Evelyn Bancroft, heir to the Bancroft Hotel fortune, a regular, a legacy passenger in Apex's files. "I specifically need that seat," Evelyn declared to Lauren, pointing at Naomi's 3A. Lauren's tone softened instantly. "Of course, Mrs. Bancroft. I'll take care of it." They approached together. "Excuse me," Lauren said loudly. "You'll need to relocate. Mrs. Bancroft has a medical need for your seat." Naomi blinked. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said calmly, "but I selected and paid for this seat." Lauren's voice dropped. "She has vertigo. The window helps her regulate." Naomi remained unmoved. "So do 3 other empty window seats," she said. Evelyn waved dismissively. "I need this side of the plane. That's where I always sit." Lauren's voice sharpened. "You can take the economy seat. It's very comfortable." Naomi's spine straightened. Beside her, the man with the civil rights folder looked up again. "Why economy?" he asked. Coolly. "There are window seats in first class." Lauren's smile thinned. "We reserve the right to accommodate passengers with medical needs." Naomi said nothing. She simply stared. More eyes turned toward the row. Curious glances, whispers, some awkward, some entertained, but nobody intervened. Lauren's voice turned low and dangerous. "This isn't the place for people like you anyway," she whispered, and Naomi made her decision. "I've asked nicely," Lauren Keating whispered, her voice no longer merely irritated but menacing. "This isn't the place for people like you. Either move voluntarily, or I'll call security to remove you from this flight." The air drained from the cabin. Conversations halted. Even the hum of the aircraft seemed to dim beneath the sudden pressure of anticipation. Naomi Carter didn't flinch. She looked around and saw what they all were waiting for, her to back down. But this wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about something far deeper. She reached for her phone. "Lauren." Is it Naomi's voice carried now, confident and sharp? "I think it's time you met someone." With a flick of her wrist, she turned the screen toward the flight attendant. It displayed Apex Air's executive portal Naomi's profile in full color, beneath the words "Majority Shareholder, Naomi Carter." Gasps rippled across the rows. A man in 4B dropped his glass. Lauren Keaton's face turned a shade paler with each second. Across the aisle, Evelyn Bancroft, wrapped in silk and entitlement, blinked as if slapped. "That's impossible," Lauren stammered, suddenly unsure of where to look. Naomi didn't blink. "I own 51% of this airline. So now, would you like to explain why you tried to evict your employer from her assigned first-class seat?" Julian Torres, the junior attendant, looked horrified. His eyes flicked from Naomi to Lauren, then down at the floor. He said nothing. Beside Naomi, Darian Blake, the civil rights attorney, was already typing feverishly into his phone. Evelyn Bancroft, usually immune to shame, remained uncharacteristically silent. What should Naomi Carter do now? Should she fire Lauren Keaton on the spot, or continue playing the long game, gathering evidence of systemic discrimination embedded into Apex Air's culture? If you've ever faced or witnessed discrimination while traveling, you already know what happens next matters, because this wasn't about revenge, it was about something much bigger. The engines finally roared to life. Flight 1923 lifted off, 40 minutes behind schedule, but time had stopped for those sitting in first class. The tension was suffocating. Every rustle of a newspaper felt loud. Every look was sharp with curiosity or fear. Only Julian Torres remained on duty in the premium cabin. He moved like a man on eggshells. "Ms. Carter," he murmured on his next pass, placing a fresh glass of champagne, her fourth in her tray. "Please accept our sincerest apologies." Naomi gave a tight, polite smile. Respect would be more refreshing than champagne. She turned to her laptop and began typing an encrypted email to Celeste Monroe, subject urgent. In flight. Incident, senior FA attempted to force relocation to economy for the benefit of a white passenger citing unverified medical need. Statement made that people like me don't belong in first class. Situation escalated. Identity revealed. Flight 1923. Request immediate policy review. Debrief on landing. As she typed, Naomi noticed Evelyn Bancroft watching her from across the aisle, whispering to her companion. One manicured hand partially shielded her mouth, but her expression was clear doubt, disbelief, derision. "Probably thinks I'm lying," Naomi thought. "These people always exaggerate," Evelyn muttered. Unaware, Naomi could read her lips. Darian leaned over, voice low. "Don't let them shake you. I've seen this routine before." He slid a card across the tray. Darian Blake, Senior Counsel, Blake and Rowe, LLP, Civil Rights and Transportation Law. "What happened to you today?" he said. "That wasn't unique. It's part of a pattern. And today, you gave it a face." Naomi turned the card in her fingers. "How do you know it's not isolated? I've represented clients against Apex before." "No class action yet until today. There was never enough hard proof." He gestured around the cabin. "Now there is." Before Naomi could respond, her phone vibrated again. "Ownership won't protect you for long. Board meeting in progress. Enjoy your temporary position." Her blood ran cold. She immediately logged into her executive portal. A notification blinked on the dashboard. Emergency board session convened by Graham Kingsley. Subject reputation, risk, and interim leadership. He was making his move while she was in the air, thousands of feet below, at Apex Air's headquarters in downtown Chicago. Graham Kingsley stood before a closed boardroom. His designer suit clung to a frame damp with sweat. "We have a situation," he began. Notably, he never mentioned that the majority shareholder was unavailable or airborne, an unfortunate incident involving a premium class customer. It's already affecting our reputation and stock performance. We need to act fast. He framed it as a leadership vacuum, a lapse in judgment, not a civil rights violation, and certainly not a mutiny. What Graham didn't know was that 6 rows behind Naomi, a Gen Z passenger with sharp instincts and a front row view, had recorded the entire confrontation. The footage was uploaded to TikTok and Twitter, aided by patchy in-flight Wi-Fi. Apex discrimination began trending before Flight 1923 crossed Denver from her apartment in Los Angeles. Celeste Monroe watched in horror as the unauthorized board meeting played out on leaked meeting minutes, while the viral video surged past 1 million views. She tried to reach Naomi. No signal. She tried Graham's line. Voicemail. She sent texts. No response. By the time Flight 1923 began its descent into LAX, the stakes had shifted dramatically. 2 million views, 12% drop in Apex share price, and a mob of reporters crowding the jet bridge. Naomi could feel it as soon as the wheels touched down. The cabin buzzed with passengers checking their phones, watching the video that had exploded midair. "She's on this flight," someone whispered. "Is that her?" another asked. Julian Torres returned to her row, voice barely controlled. "Ms. Carter, there's a situation at the terminal. Situation Airport Security has requested you remain on board. Media presence, they say." Before Naomi could respond, Darian Blake leaned in. "Be careful," he said. "Security like this isn't always protection. Sometimes it's containment." Naomi nodded subtly. Then 4 men entered the cabin, uniformed, professional, authoritative. But something was off. Their patches weren't TSA or LAPD. They bore Apex Air Security insignia. They answered not to the airport, but to Graham Kingsley. "Ms. Carter," the lead officer said smoothly, "we'll escort you through a private exit. Company protocol for your safety." She gathered her things, eyeing the media through the tiny window. Dozens of cameras, phones, reporters. Then she noticed Celeste Monroe, just beyond the terminal's restricted area, arguing with airport staff, waving credentials in the air. But the security detail didn't lead Naomi toward the terminal. They guided her down a side stairwell onto the tarmac, toward a black SUV with tinted windows. "Wait," Naomi protested. "I need to make a public statement. I need direct orders from corporate." The lead officer interrupted. "For your safety." She was ushered into the vehicle before she could resist further. The door slammed shut with finality. Behind her, the flight crew began disembarking passengers. Reporters shouted questions no one could answer. In the rearview mirror, Naomi watched the plane grow smaller behind them, and Celeste, still shouting, grow more distant. She wasn't being escorted. She was being disappeared. Naomi Carter's eyes locked with Celeste Monroe's, a fleeting, silent exchange through the SUV window before the door slammed shut, severing her only visible connection to the outside. The vehicle veered off the main route toward a nondescript building, far from the terminal crowds. Her phone buzzed nonstop in her palm. But every call failed. No bars, no signal. "We're taking you to a secure room," the head of the Apex Air Security Detail said. His tone stripped of emotion. The situation's escalated. Within minutes, Naomi was inside a sleek but sterile corporate conference room. Leather chairs, marble table, glass walls, the kind of space meant to impress executives, not detain them. But the click of the lock behind her turned the setting into a gilded cage. She immediately tested the door. Locked. From the outside. For the first time, Naomi Carter, majority shareholder of Apex Air, was a prisoner in the airline she controlled. Outside the building, chaos blossomed. At the terminal, dozens of media crews had arrived, jostling for position. Passengers from Flight 1923 stepped into a frenzy of microphones, cameras, and flashing lights. Each held a phone. each with a story. Testimonies spread like wildfire across networks. She told them she owned the airline. One woman told Fox News. The flight attendant's face turned white as a sheet. It was disgusting. A man added on ABC. They treated her like she didn't belong, then acted like she was royalty once they knew who she was. In another part of the terminal, Lauren Keating clung to her own narrative, surrounded by friendly outlets and PR handlers. She cried openly, her mascara smudged from deliberate tears. "I've given 15 years to Apex." She sobbed. "One misunderstanding. And now social media's trying to ruin my life. I mean, I have black friends." Cameras zoomed in on her trembling chin, broadcasting sympathy across the country. Meanwhile, across the airfield, Celeste Monroe was locked in her own confrontation. Flashing her executive credentials to a reluctant security team, her voice rose in frustration. "I'm the chief strategy officer. I need access to Naomi Carter now." The guard checked his tablet. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your credentials have been temporarily suspended." Orders from acting CEO Graham Kingsley. Celeste's jaw tightened. That's not legally possible. Not without a full board vote, which cannot occur without the majority shareholders' consent. The guard shrugged. "Just following orders." Inside the conference room, Naomi's laptop hummed softly as she accessed Apex's internal systems. Her background in tech had taught her more than algorithms, taught her how to slip through digital cracks. A forgotten admin portal she discovered during due diligence granted her backdoor access. What she saw made her stomach churn. Graham Kingsley had convened an emergency board meeting, claiming a crisis in executive leadership. He'd cited obscure bylaws to grant himself temporary authority. The vote had passed, but without Naomi's participation, it wasn't binding. Still, he moved fast. Press releases, market statements, strategic leaks. A headline caught Naomi's eye: Apex names interim CEO amid investor unrest. The article was locked behind a paywall. She didn't need the details. She already knew. Her title was being stripped from her while she sat in a locked room. A new message pinged through her secure line. From Darian Blake, Naomi. "We believe you've been unlawfully detained. Legal team is at LAX now. Location needed. There is mounting evidence of a coordinated attempt to remove you." She didn't have time to reply before the door opened. 2 uniformed guards entered, followed by a woman Naomi instantly recognized, Evelyn Bancroft's personal assistant. Elegant, cold, calculated. "Ms. Carter," she said, her tone smooth and corporate. "Mr. Kingsley has arranged for your transfer to Apex headquarters for a full debrief. Your car is waiting." Naomi remained seated. "I'm not going anywhere. As majority shareholder, I demand access to my board and executive team immediately." The woman smiled, unflinching. "That won't be possible right now. The situation requires sensitive management. Mr. Kingsley believes Graham Kingsley has no legal standing to detain me or make unilateral decisions." Naomi interrupted. "This is corporate obstruction." The guards looked uneasy. "For everyone's comfort," the assistant said smoothly, "we've arranged." "My comfort." Naomi stood. "Was it for my comfort that I was locked in this room? Is it for my comfort that your COO has given unauthorized press conferences about me, or that your staff attempted to eject me from my own paid seat while your systems were broadcasting I was nothing more than a customer?" The guards shifted uncomfortably. Their eyes darted toward the hallway. "Miss Carter," one began. "We have orders to escort you. Your orders are unlawful," she snapped. "If you touch me, that's assault, and I doubt either of you wants your retirement tied to Graham Kingsley's sinking ship." Silence stretched between them. Then the guard's radio crackled. "Team Alpha. Be advised. Federal transportation authorities have arrived at LAX, requesting access to all parties involved in Flight 1923. Press volume has tripled. Repeat, federal authorities on site." The atmosphere shifted immediately. Suddenly, the consequences were real. The guards exchanged glances. Self-preservation overtook blind loyalty. "I think," the senior officer said to the assistant, "we need to reevaluate." Before she could respond, the fire alarm shrieked to life. Red strobes flashed, sprinklers activated overhead, drenching everyone in seconds. In the chaos, Naomi didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag, slipped past the confused trio, and bolted for the emergency exit. The cold air outside hit her like a wall. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. The story wasn't just going viral anymore. It was detonating. The fire alarm hadn't gone off by accident. Naomi Carter knew it the second she burst through the exit door into the bright California sunlight and spotted Celeste Monroe, already waiting beside a nondescript silver sedan, engine running. "Get in," Celeste called out, waving her toward the open passenger door. "Graham is playing hardball. We need to move now." Naomi didn't hesitate. She threw herself into the car as security personnel flooded from the rear of the administrative building behind her, too late to intercept them. As they pulled away, Naomi caught a glimpse of Darian Blake standing at a distance near a terminal walkway. He raised his phone toward her, recording, documenting. Proof that she'd been detained by her own company. This was no longer about a racist encounter on a flight. It had become a war for control of Apex Air, of truth, and of the narrative. The sedan sped along the airport's back access roads, bypassing press vans and airport security teams who would be looking for Naomi at the main terminal. Her breath came in sharp bursts, adrenaline crackling beneath her skin. "They locked me in a conference room," she said, still stunned, "in a company I own." Celeste's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Graham's scared. He called an emergency board meeting under an obscure bylaw that hasn't been used since the company's founding. He's telling everyone this is a media stunt and that you've destabilized the company." Naomi grabbed her phone no signal. "They've cut my access." "Signal jammers," Celeste said with a bitter edge. "Technically illegal, but they use them to block leaks during high-profile transport." She reached into her coat pocket and handed Naomi a cheap flip phone. "Untraceable. You'll have a secure line." Naomi flipped it open, staring at the outdated keypad. "Where are we going?" "Private suite in a hotel I booked under an alias. Somewhere safe enough to regroup." Naomi nodded as Celeste swerved onto a narrow service road, every movement measured, calculated. The coup Graham was orchestrating hadn't happened overnight. It had been premeditated. He was ready for this moment. But so was she. 20 minutes later, they entered the hotel room overlooking Bayfront Harbor View. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the water, but Naomi ignored it. Her attention was on the laptop Celeste had already opened and powered up on the desk. She sat down, immediately connecting to a secure Wi-Fi signal and pulling up Apex Air's executive system. "I'm locked out of almost everything," she muttered, fingers flying across the keys. "He's shut down my admin credentials. Try the backup server. Celeste suggested, leaning over her shoulder. "The one we set up last month after that phishing attack." Naomi's brow furrowed. She dove into the alternative access route one she'd built as a safeguard when she noticed unusual internal activity during her first month as owner. After 3 intense minutes, she broke through the firewall. "I'm in," she said. Then her voice changed. "But something's wrong." Celeste leaned closer. On screen, file after file disappeared before their eyes. "He's deleting the discrimination complaint archive." The system folders blinked and vanished. Documents that represented years of employee grievances, evidence of systemic racism, gone. "That's destruction of evidence," Celeste whispered. "Felony-level obstruction." Naomi's face was set, determined. This isn't just erasure. Look, he's uploading new files. The screen filled with forged evaluations, emails, and HR records, fabricated complaints painting Naomi as irrational, emotional, power-hungry, a memo from Naomi Carter to Lauren Keating, threatening to use her ownership for media leverage. "They're building a counter-story," Naomi said, almost to herself. "A full-blown setup. They're making it look like I staged the entire incident." Celeste's expression hardened. Graham has always played dirty, but this... Naomi paused. A sudden realization struck her. Wait, the system logs. Look at the deletion pattern. It's all being done under Lauren Keating's login. That's impossible. She's been in front of cameras all day, sobbing for sympathy. Unless... Naomi pivoted to another terminal and ran a quick scan of the airport's internal security feeds. One of her first decisions as majority owner had been to test the vulnerabilities in Apex Air's digital infrastructure. That knowledge was now saving her. A grainy feed lit up the screen. Naomi fast-forwarded, then stopped. There. Lauren Keating, still in her media-ready outfit, walked into the back of the administrative building. Her face was dry, her expression composed. A minute later, Graham Kingsley appeared. He greeted her like family. Naomi stared. Of course, she's not just an employee. She's his former sister-in-law. The pieces clicked into place. Lauren had been Graham's plant all along, a mole embedded in cabin crew ranks, reporting on diversity programs and targeting dissenters. "This goes way deeper than I thought," Naomi said. "They've used racism as a smokescreen for years, just another tool to silence and control." And now Celeste asked, "They're trying to erase everything, but not before I got this." Naomi turned the laptop toward her mentor. On screen was an offshore account statement, registered under Graham Kingsley's name, deposits from a shell corporation, a shell that, on closer inspection, traced back to Evelyn Bancroft's family trust. "This isn't just racism," Naomi said, voice low and steady. "It's financial corruption. They've been using hush money from off-book accounts to silence whistleblowers. When they couldn't buy you off," Celeste murmured. "They tried to erase you." A burner phone rang. Naomi picked it up. Darian Blake's voice crackled on the other end. "Naomi, listen carefully. Graham's filed for emergency restraining orders. He's spinning this as a hostile takeover attempt. You're officially a security risk. Their teams are looking for you right now. Are the board members still in the dark? But I've spoken to 3. They're beginning to question his story. I've arranged a meeting at my firm. Confidential. Private security sweep completed an hour ago." Naomi checked her watch. "We'll be there in 30. I've already filed an emergency injunction to preserve the company's data." Darian added, but Naomi's sources say Graham's gone outside Apex for muscle. Private contractors. These aren't rent-a-cops, they're professionals. Naomi exhaled slowly. Understood. She disconnected, then turned back to Celeste. We're going to that meeting. It's time the board hears my side. Celeste stood. Let's make this fast. Naomi grabbed the burner, the laptop, and the hard drive she'd been backing up. As they exited the hotel room, she took one last look at her phone screen. The hashtag, We Stand With Naomi, had begun trending. The tide was turning, but Apex Air wasn't just a company, it was a battlefield. And she was going back in. Ready, Celeste Monroe asked, car keys in hand. Naomi Carter nodded. The fear and hurt from hours before burned away by something colder, sharper, resolve. This isn't just about me anymore, she said. It's about every person who's ever been told they didn't belong just for existing in the wrong skin. Graham Kingsley had underestimated her. That was his first mistake. They slipped through the hotel's service exit, unaware that surveillance had already clocked their presence. In a sterile office across town, Graham watched the footage on a tablet, his finger tapping impatiently on the screen. She's on the move. He muttered into the phone, headed for Blake's firm. Do whatever it takes. The war for Apex Air had left the runway. It was now flying straight into the heart of corporate warfare, with justice, power, and legacy on the line. The sleek steel and glass structure of Baker and Associates loomed over downtown San Francisco like a fortress. As Celeste steered the car into the underground garage, Naomi's eyes scanned every shadow, cameras, cars, people on phones. Everything felt like a threat. Darian Blake's message flashed on her temporary phone service elevator, 15th floor, then switch lifts to executive level, main lobbies compromised. The service halls were a maze of concrete and echo. Janitorial carts lined the corridors. Maintenance workers glanced their way, but said nothing. Finally, a young paralegal appeared and swiped them through a locked service elevator. Ms. Monroe, Ms. Carter, this way. Mr. Blake is waiting, upstairs. The air was thick with tension. 3 Apex Air Board members stood as Naomi entered the glass-walled conference room. Thomas Ellison, the company's longtime legal advisor, Philip Way, representative for international investors, and Isabella Ramos, the newest member, known for her fierce advocacy for ethics in business. All 3 turned as Naomi entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity, concern, and disbelief. Thank you for coming, Darian said, standing beside a digital board that showed Apex Air's crumbling stock price. As you can see, time isn't a luxury we have. Naomi wasted no time. Graham Kingsley has orchestrated a hostile takeover, she said, voice steady. He illegally seized operational control of Apex Air, detained me against my will, and is actively erasing evidence of discrimination within the company. Ellison raised a hand cautiously. Those are serious claims. Ms. Carter. The board meeting this morning was described as necessary following your public meltdown. Naomi connected her laptop to the display screen. Let me show you what really happened. For the next 20 minutes, Naomi laid out the facts, the flight incident, her unlawful detention, the live deletion of the airline's discrimination archives, the faked documents, the offshore payments connecting Graham Kingsley and Evelyn Bancroft. Then, she dropped the most damning piece, a log of private messages between Lauren Keating and Graham, revealing their coordination to provoke a scene mid-flight, timed with a board meeting she was never supposed to attend. This wasn't just racism, Naomi said. It was a a corporate trap meant to discredit me and bury years of wrongdoing. Isabella Ramos leaned forward. But why you Graham didn't even know you were flying. He did. Celeste broke in. There was a leak. Someone from Naomi's inner circle sold her flight itinerary. Graham had time to prepare. Philip Way looked visibly shaken, and we weren't informed that our majority shareholder had been detained. Graham told the board she requested privacy after a breakdown. Darian added, placing a legal brief on the table. And here's the kicker: he filed for temporary power under an obscure emergency bylaw without her vote. Ellison's brows furrowed, which violates Section 4.1 of the shareholder charter. That meeting was invalid. It gets worse, Naomi said. This morning, Graham filed restraining orders to bar me from company property, claiming I'm mentally unstable. The room went cold. For a long beat, no one spoke. Ellison finally stood. We need a real board meeting. Tonight. All voting members present. He won't come if he knows I'll be there. Naomi warned. He's playing dictator now, as strategies flew and opinions clashed. Naomi's phone buzzed. Unknown number. They know where you are. Private security just entered the building. Back entrance. Armed. Naomi's eyes snapped up. We need to leave. Now. Darian scanned the text and swore under his breath. This is a law office. He wouldn't dare. He would. Naomi interrupted. He already has. Seconds later, the building's security intercom chimed. Attention. Unauthorized access in Service Corridor B. Security en route. Celeste was already up. Is there a way out? Darian moved fast, pulling open a panel in the executive bathroom. Back exit. Lawyers use it when the press is waiting. Follow me. They rushed down a maintenance stairwell, boots echoing on concrete. Where are we headed? Naomi whispered. Courthouse, Darian replied. Judge Helena Kim. She's honest. I'm filing for emergency injunctive relief against Graham. 20 chaotic minutes later, they climbed the marble steps of the San Francisco County Courthouse. Naomi felt the weight of the moment, not just for her, but for every employee, every passenger, every story lost in Apex Air's forgotten complaint files. Inside a private judicial chamber, Judge Helena Kim examined their hastily prepared paperwork. She removed her glasses and looked directly at Naomi. Let me understand, she said. You're alleging that the acting CEO of a Fortune 500 company unlawfully detained its majority owner, destroyed civil rights-related evidence, and dispatched armed contractors to silence her. Yes. Your Honor, Darian replied. We have digital logs of system wipes, testimony regarding her detainment, and evidence of offshore fraud. Naomi added quietly. They buried real harm for years, and now they're trying to bury me. Judge Kim looked between them, then reached for her gavel. Temporary injunction is granted, she declared, effective immediately. Mr. Graham Kingsley is barred from Apex Air's executive operations, premises, and internal systems. The company is to freeze all deletions and submit full records for independent audit. Naomi felt the breath she hadn't realized she was holding escape in one long exhale. Outside the courthouse, reporters were already gathering, their questions muffled by distance. Darian checked his watch. We've got 12 hours until Graham makes his next move. Celeste looked at Naomi. What now? Naomi straightened her shoulders. Now we tell the world the truth. Judge Helena Kim looked over the rim of her glasses. expression unreadable. And you can prove majority ownership. Naomi Carter handed over documents from her encrypted financial accounts. My controlling interest in Apex Air was acquired through multiple investment vehicles over 18 months, she explained. The transactions are complex but entirely legal. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to her clerk. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order against Graham Kingsley, barring him from executive authority pending formal review. As the order was signed and sealed, Naomi's phone buzzed notifications flooding her screen. Someone had leaked airport security footage. It showed Naomi being led away by Apex Corporate Security, confirming her account of detainment. Public sentiment exploded online. Hashtags like Apex Cover-Up and Yas Justice for Naomi trended across platforms. Even more startling, Lauren Keating had given yet another interview, this time reversing course. Gone were the tears and platitudes. She now claimed she had been forced into an impossible position, subtly implicating leadership. She's jumping ship, Celeste Monroe muttered. They're losing control of the narrative. As they left the courthouse, police escort waiting, Naomi spotted two familiar figures across the street. Evelyn Bancroft, draped in luxury, spoke with a man whose back was turned. When he shifted, Naomi recognized the profile, Graham Kingsley. They're following us themselves now, she whispered. Not for long, Darian Blake replied, nodding toward the approaching cruiser. That's our escorto, your next meeting. Naomi blinked. Meeting with who? The Federal Aviation Administration? They want to discuss discriminatory practices affecting passenger safety. And the Securities and Exchange Commission is looking into those offshore accounts you uncovered. For the first time in days, Naomi saw panic in Graham's eyes as the police cruiser pulled away with her inside. The tide was turning. At 7:30 the next morning, Apex Air's emergency board meeting convened in a secure law firm office in downtown San Francisco. The air crackled with anticipation and tension. Security was airtight. Private contractors manned the entrances, verifying IDs and scanning for bugs. The boardroom itself had been swept twice. Naomi entered last, flanked by Celeste and Darian. Gone was the college hoodie. She wore a sharp charcoal suit, tailored to convey capability without hiding her youth. Her hair was styled naturally, and a single gold pendant her mother's rested near her collarbone. Across the table, Graham Kingsley barely concealed his surprise at her transformation. His gaze hardened, falling back into the mask of control. He was surrounded by loyalists, 3 board members, 2 attorneys, and Evelyn Bancroft, present as a major investor. 8 other board members remained unaligned. Their eyes followed Naomi closely, curious and calculating. Leonard Warren, the board's 72-year-old chair, called the session to order with visible discomfort. We have conflicting claims of executive authority, he began. Allegations of misconduct, and a court order that arrived at my home before sunrise. He held up the signed injunction from Judge Helena Kim. This temporarily suspends Mr. Kingsley from any executive function until further notice. One of Graham's attorneys stood instantly. That order was obtained without full representation from Apex Legal Counsel. We intend to have it dismissed. For now, Leonard replied, it stands, let's proceed. And with that, the floor opened. Graham went first. His voice was practiced, almost paternal. He painted Naomi as an overly ambitious young investor weaponizing social justice to destabilize the company. The flight incident unfortunate, but inflated by media frenzy. His assumption of control a necessary response to crisis. She's never run a company, Graham concluded smoothly, not even a lemonade stand. And now she wants to control an international airline. This is activism over experience. Naomi didn't flinch. When her turn came, she didn't start with a rebuttal. Instead, she quietly connected her laptop to the boardroom display. I'd like to show you what Mr. Kingsley has been trying to erase. The screen filled with a spreadsheet hundreds of internal discrimination complaints from Apex employees over the past 5 years, each marked with coded outcomes NFA no further action, settled, terminated, and, under settled, amounts paid often tied to confidential NDAs. These were systematically deleted yesterday, Naomi explained. But I anticipated obstruction and backed up everything during my acquisition process. Silence fell over the boardroom. One of Graham's attorneys began to object, but Philip Way held up a hand. Let her speak. Naomi proceeded with surgical precision. She showed video of her detainment, leaked messages between Lauren and Graham, surveillance footage of the two meeting after the flight, and finally, the money trail. Offshore payments from a shell company in Evelyn Bancroft's family trust, the same account used to fund settlements, the same account Graham used to mask illicit payouts. This isn't about a single incident, Naomi concluded. It's about a culture of discrimination protected by top leadership for financial gain. When I refused to play along, they attempted a coup. For the first time, Evelyn's carefully maintained composure cracked. These are wild accusations, she snapped. From a girl playing with family money. My family has supported Apex for decades. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Since we're discussing family, she changed slides. A web of names appeared. Graham, Evelyn, Lauren, all connected. You failed to disclose your nephew, Graham Kingsley, sits on this board, nor that Lauren Keating is your former sister-in-law. That's 3 family members influencing Apex culture from the top down. Graham stood abruptly, voice rising. This is a witch hunt. My personal relationships. Sit down, Leonard ordered, voice stern. Ms. Carter has the floor. For the next half hour, Naomi laid out her vision, not just for fixing the damage, but transforming Apex Air's future. Independent oversight of discrimination complaints. Transparent quarterly reporting of incidents and outcomes. Diversity benchmarks in hiring and promotions, customer equality audits for service practices, whistleblower protections, anonymous reporting channels. Leadership reform grounded in measurable accountability. We can't afford superficial change, Naomi said, her tone steady but impassioned. If we want to earn public trust again, we must lead the industry, not just catch up to it. The room remained still. Several board members exchanged looks. Even a few of Graham's allies shifted uneasily. Leonard cleared his throat. Miss Carter, thank you. Then he turned to the rest of the room. We'll now move to executive session. Only voting members remain. Naomi stood. She met Graham's gaze head-on before walking calmly to the door. Celeste and Darian followed. Outside in the hall, Naomi leaned against the cool wall, eyes closed. Whatever happens in there, Celeste whispered, you've already changed everything. Naomi opened her eyes, voice quiet but resolute. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Throughout her presentation, Naomi Carter had walked a razor's edge between moral clarity and business acumen. She spoke not just of justice, but of opportunity, explaining how reform could boost customer loyalty, increase employee retention, and reduce costly legal exposure. Her insights into airline logistics, cost structures, and consumer sentiment landed with quiet force. In conclusion, she said, voice unwavering, this board has a simple choice: continue defending leadership that profited from discrimination, or embrace change that rebuilds our reputation and creates sustainable growth. For a moment, silence, then chaos. Voices rose, arguments clashed. Graham Kingsley barked over the noise. "She's 19. This is absurd. Do you even understand the operational complexity of this industry?" Naomi turned toward him without missing a beat. "I built the algorithm that saved Apex Air $40 million in fuel costs last year. Age reflects time, not capability. I'm not trying to fly every plane or balance every budget. That's why we have experts. What I am doing is ending a culture that punished passengers and employees for not fitting a biased mold." The debate cracked like a thunderstorm. Two of Graham's allies began wavering. Leonard Warren, the chairman, finally called for a recess before the vote. The boardroom cleared. Only Naomi, Celeste, Darian, and Graham remained. Graham approached slowly, his expression hard. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed. "This industry will devour you. I've survived 3 bankruptcies, 2 federal probes, and more corporate coups than you've had birthdays. You won't last 6 months." Naomi looked him dead in the eye. "The difference is, I'm not here to survive. I'm here to change everything. You spent your life preserving a system. I'm here to dismantle it." When the board reconvened, Leonard addressed the room with formality. On the matter of executive control and corporate governance, he said, "The board will now vote." The tally came in quickly. 6 for Graham, 6 for Naomi. All eyes turned to Leonard. "In 30 years of boardroom service," he said slowly, "I've never seen such damning evidence of deliberate misconduct." He looked straight at Graham. "My vote is for Ms. Carter, effective immediately. She is reinstated as majority shareholder with full executive authority." The room held its breath. Then Graham exploded. "This is corporate suicide. You're handing a billion-dollar airline to a child because she played the race card." "She's going to ruin everything, Mr. Kingsley," Leonard snapped, voice slicing through the air. "Control yourself." But Graham wasn't finished. His mask cracked completely. "You think this is about race?" he sneered. "It's about business. People don't want to see certain passengers in first class. That's reality, not racism." The silence that followed was louder than his outburst. One by one, board members looked away, disgust clear on their faces. Even his lawyers paled. Leonard spoke softly. "I believe that confirms what many suspected. Security will escort Mr. Kingsley out, effective immediately. His access to Apex systems is revoked." As 2 security officers approached, Graham pointed a trembling hand at Naomi. "This isn't over," he growled. "I built this airline. I have friends in regulation, in finance, in places you can't even imagine. You've made an enemy you can't afford. Little girl." The door slammed behind him. Evelyn Bancroft rose a moment later, her movement still graceful, her exit silent. But her influence, like Graham had been shattered. Naomi stood in the eye of the storm she had created. She had won. but the air was heavy with what came next. The war for Apex Air's soul had just begun. By noon, the counterattack arrived. Naomi watched it unfold from the command center they had set up inside Celeste Monroe's downtown condo. A dozen monitors glowed with headlines, comment sections, trending hashtags. The message was coordinated. Talk show panels, online influencers, business analysts, all repeating versions of the same claim: Apex Air had been hijacked by a social justice crusader with no real-world experience. Graham's media machine was already in full swing. He prepared this in case he lost. Celeste muttered, scanning multiple windows of search results. They've got pre-written talking points slipped to journalists, seeded to influencers, echoed on conservative platforms. This is manufactured backlash. Naomi nodded grimly. Classic Graham. Always 2 steps ahead, always a backup plan. Customer service lines at Apex Air were flooded mostly from the same 3 area codes. This isn't organic, Darian said during a video call. It's a coordinated complaint campaign. Likely paid callers threatening to pull frequent flyer status if wokeness affects boarding decisions. Worse still, anonymous sources started leaking to aviation reporters. They questioned Naomi's credentials, cast doubt on her algorithm, claimed she skipped classes at MIT, claimed her leadership would crash the airline faster than a software bug. It was all baseless, but meant to destabilize her. Not the truth. They're not arguing the facts, Celeste said. They're trying to delegitimize your right to lead. But by nightfall, it got worse. Much worse. Naomi's private number was flooded with racist texts and voicemails. Her college dormitory was evacuated after a fake bomb threat. Her address was posted online with messages encouraging patriots to educate her about real America. "This isn't PR," Naomi whispered, holding her phone like it might burn her. One message included her photo digitally altered with grotesque violence. "This is psychological warfare." Security consultants swept the condo, hardened entry points, disabled microphones. But the emotional damage was harder to contain. Every ping, every ring could be another threat. At 6:15 the next morning, Naomi sat alone with her tea when Darian called. "We've got a new wave coming," he warned. 3 former employees going on record today, claiming they were pushed out for opposing diversity initiatives. They all took settlements under Graham. Now they're flipping the narrative. Minutes later, Naomi watched the coordinated interviews air on morning shows. They spoke of reverse discrimination and a hostile climate for traditional employees. Their complaints twisted into talking points. Then came Lauren Keating. "I was set up," she claimed, "targeted, used. This wasn't about equity, it was a coup." She sat on a couch beside a sympathetic host, mascara slightly smeared, voice perfectly breaking. "Ms. Carter needed someone to play the villain. And I was convenient, even more damaging." Evelyn Bancroft used her social circles in finance and media to seed doubts about Apex's stability. Within hours, analysts were quoting anonymous investor concerns. The stock dropped another 15%. Inside the condo, Naomi paced. "They're controlling the narrative. We're just reacting because we're fighting on their terms," Celeste replied. "Old versus new, safe versus risky, tradition versus chaos. We need to change the battlefield." Naomi stopped pacing, her hands clenched into fists. "Then that's what we'll do." The call came just after midnight. Naomi Carter's secure line buzzed with a chilling report her San Francisco apartment had been professionally breached. No stolen valuables, no obvious signs of entry, just microscopic disturbances in air filters and digital security traces, enough to alarm her private consultant. They weren't robbing you, the consultant explained. They were searching for intel. Likely something to discredit you or reinforce their counter-story. Naomi stared at her bedroom wall, the weight of the violation pressing into her chest. For the first time in this war, fear cracked through her armor. Maybe Graham's right, she murmured to Celeste Monroe, who had sat beside her through every turn. Maybe I'm in over my head. Celeste didn't hesitate. That's exactly what they want you to believe. Graham fights dirty because he knows he can't win on merit. They escalate because you're getting too close. Before Naomi could respond, every screen in their condo lit up. Breaking. Federal authorities announced preliminary investigation into Apex Air for possible securities violations and discriminatory practices. Stock plummeted another 10%. Naomi blinked. This should help us. It proves everything we've said. Look again, Celeste pointed out. The language is vague current and former leadership equally under review. Graham's friends are shaping the narrative. If he goes down, he's dragging you with him. Darian Blake confirmed it 2 hours later in a pre-dawn strategy call. They're crafting a both sides story, he said. Graham as the seasoned executive who cut corners but delivered results. You as the radical newcomer destabilizing everything. By midday, the hammer dropped. Graham Kingsley filed a personal defamation lawsuit against Naomi, seeking $50 million. Simultaneously, he filed for a temporary restraining order, TRO, barring her from Apex premises or contact with employees while litigation proceeded. It's a stall tactic, Darian said, scrolling through the dense legal filings. The TRO keeps you out of the company during the most critical weeks. Meanwhile, the defamation suit poisons your credibility. Naomi scanned the documents, her eyes locked on the judge assigned, Judge Calvin Bancroft. She said slowly, any relation to Evelyn Darian hesitated. Her cousin, Graham venue shopped until he found a favorable assignment. The blows kept coming. Credit agencies issued warnings about Apex's stability. Major corporate clients delayed renewals. And a message appeared on Naomi's phone from a masked number watching your company collapse. Resign now, and this ends. Next time, stay in your lane. Naomi knew the voice behind those words even without a signature. Commentary invites. Have you ever faced someone using power to silence truth? Comment number 1 if Naomi should publicly expose Graham's tactics. Comment number 2 if she should focus on running Apex and let the results speak. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe in holding the powerful accountable. Dawn rose over San Francisco as Naomi stared out across the fog-cloaked city. She hadn't slept. The TRO hearing was set for 9:00 a.m. before Judge Calvin Bancroft, a man whose last name now felt like a trapdoor. The car ride to court was quiet. Tension thick in the air. In a move only Graham could spin. Darian said finally, he's claiming that your truthful statements about discrimination harmed Apex's reputation and therefore qualify as defamation. But we have evidence, Naomi said. All of it's true. Truth is only as useful as what the court allows. Darian replied, and they've already filed motions to exclude your backup files. They're claiming unauthorized access to company servers. So, They destroy the official records and argue that my backups are illegal. Darian nodded. Welcome to corporate law. It's not about fairness. It's about which version survives the rules. Outside the courthouse, protesters clashed on the steps. Some held signs reading "Justice for Apex Workers." Others parroted talking points "Don't politicize the skies" and "Keep activism off the runway." The narrative war had reached the public square. Inside the courtroom, Graham Kingsley looked refreshed, polished, and fully in control. Flanked by 5 lawyers from Prescott and Winthrop, he projected serene superiority. Naomi, seated beside Darian, refused to let her exhaustion show. Judge Bancroft entered. Cold blue eyes, chiseled aristocratic features. He looked every inch Evelyn Bancroft's kin. From the first gavel strike, the bias was clear. 3 of Naomi's witnesses, former Apex employees with first-hand accounts, were excluded for being redundant. All of Graham's stayed. Your Honor, Darian objected. We're talking about testimony from victims of discrimination. This hearing, Bancroft cut in, is about a restraining order, not to systemic allegations. Relevance is key. Naomi clenched her jaw. Every motion that mattered was denied. When Darian tried to introduce financial records linking Graham and Evelyn through offshore accounts, Bancroft blocked it. By noon, it was clear the outcome was predetermined. Judge Bancroft issued the TRO Naomi was barred from Apex facilities, internal systems, or employee contact for 10 business days. The ruling landed like a gavel to the chest. Across the courtroom, Graham leaned back calm, victorious. His eyes met Naomi's, gleaming with vindication. This wasn't justice. It was control by another name. Outside, Naomi faced a storm of flashing cameras and shouted questions. "Ms. Carter, are you stepping down? Did you fabricate the discrimination claims as Graham Kingsley, your rightful CEO?" She said nothing. Back inside the waiting SUV, Naomi sat beside Celeste and Darian in silence. "We're officially locked out," Darian said softly, but not powerless. Naomi stared at the city racing by. She saw it clearly now. They hadn't just tried to silence her voice. They were building a machine to erase everything she represented. "We need to change the battlefield," Naomi said. Celeste nodded. "Then let's stop fighting on their turf. This is only temporary relief," Judge Calvin Bancroft intoned, almost as if offering sympathy rather than a ruling. "The court acknowledges Ms. Carter's majority ownership, but must act to prevent potential irreparable harm to Apex Air during this volatile period." Outside the courthouse, Graham Kingsley was already addressing the media. Framed by a phalanx of attorneys and flanked by a pair of carefully selected Apex employees, he exuded manufactured humility. "I'm gratified the court recognizes the need for experienced leadership. My focus remains solely on Apex Air's stability and the thousands of employees who depend on responsible governance." Across the plaza, Naomi Carter stood before a wall of cameras, composed yet clearly weighed down. The ruling had temporarily stripped her of her ability to lead, but not her resolve. This order changes nothing about the truth. Discrimination happened at Apex Air. It was covered up, institutionalized, and weaponized. Those responsible will be held accountable. Back at the temporary headquarters, Celeste Monroe had secured a modern loft overlooking the bathed tone of the emergency strategy session was grim. With Naomi legally barred from direct involvement for 10 business days, Graham had unchecked access to purge, manipulate, and destroy. We need a two-front war, Celeste stated calmly. File an immediate appeal to a higher court, but more importantly, build a new case that doesn't hinge on Naomi's current ability to act inside the company. Darian Blake nodded. Already in motion. I've contacted attorneys representing over a dozen former Apex employees. We're preparing a consolidated class action targeting Graham, Evelyn, and Lauren directly circumventing the TRO. Naomi's eyes lit with a new kind of focus. I'm not barred from testifying. I can be their witness. Then, the first break came from an unexpected angle. Lauren Keating's attorney reached out to Darian. She wanted a private meeting. She's spooked, Darian reported. Says Graham's using her as a scapegoat and she wants out. She'll testify in exchange for immunity from civil liability, and she claims she has tapes. Naomi tensed. She's changed her story twice in public. How can we trust her? We don't have to trust her, Celeste replied. We trust the evidence. The recordings, if real, were potentially explosive directives from Graham to prioritize traditional passengers in first-class code for wealthy, older white customers. And it was only the beginning. Meanwhile, Evelyn Bancroft, far from idle, activated her political network. In days, several congressional allies began voicing concerns about federal investigations into Apex's business practices. The lead investigator at the Department of Transportation was quietly reassigned. They're tightening the circle, Celeste observed. Graham may have lost control of the board, but his grip on the system remains. Naomi's heart ached most for the Apex employees trapped in the crossfire. Operational chaos had trickled down delayed flights, confused schedules, and frontline staff bombarded by customer outrage and viral misinformation. Pilots began seeking work at competitors. Crew members whispered of resignation. He'll burn the company to the ground before he lets go, Naomi said, flipping through another leaked report. He's already deleting files, and now he's going after people. Word came quickly. Employees who'd supported Naomi or even just questioned internal policies were being abruptly restructured. Luggage handlers with 20 years on the job, flight attendants from Naomi's original flight, anyone who might testify, gone. This isn't just a cover-up, Celeste murmured. It's a purge. Naomi was seething, but she couldn't speak publicly. Not yet. A second shockwave hit when a junior attorney at Graham's firm, Prescott and Winthrop, contacted Darian anonymously. I can't be part of this anymore. The message read, attached was an internal memo explosive. The firm had knowingly withheld memos from Apex's legal discovery process, acknowledging the veracity of several discrimination claims, proof that Graham's entire narrative was built on buried truths. This is textbook malpractice, Darian said, and if we can get this in front of the right judge, it could dismantle Graham's case. But not Judge Bancroft, not Evelyn's cousin, so they filed an emergency petition for judicial reassignment, citing undisclosed familial conflicts and procedural misconduct. As they waited, Graham made his boldest move yet, filing to extend the restraining order, citing ongoing instability. Simultaneously, his PR machine flooded the media with messages about how he was restoring order to a company in chaos. Few outlets challenged the contradiction. Naomi's days blurred into exhaustion and strategizing. Her nights were sleepless, haunted by security alerts, personal threats, and the weight of thousands of livelihoods. She never let it show in public, but in private. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Golden Gate, she cracked, quietly, tearfully. "I never wanted to fight like this," she told Celeste. "I just wanted to build something better, a place where my dad's engineering brilliance would be recognized, where my mom's flight attendant uniform wasn't a license for passengers to ignore her." Celeste placed a hand over hers. "That's why they're scared of you. You're not playing a game. You're building a future." Then came the message. 3 days before the final hearing. It was brief. It came from a secure email routed through multiple Apex IP addresses. The sender, anonymous. The content, simple. Check the server archive, Eagle, though 4. Before Graham erases it all, audio, video, internal chats. The truth is bigger than you think. Naomi Carter sat quietly by the cafe window across from Apex Air's headquarters. Her posture was calm, but every muscle beneath her tailored coat was tense. Her eyes locked on the building's front entrance. Inside, shareholders were gathering for the emergency meeting designed to cut her off from any future operational control. Beside her, Celeste Monroe sipped her coffee with practiced patience. "Jason should have called by now," she murmured. "He's trying," Naomi said, glancing at her secure device again. "But something's jamming the line." At that moment, 2 floors up, the shareholder meeting was already underway. Graham Kingsley, standing at the head of the long glass conference table, was in his element. His voice was measured, his body language confident. "As you all know," he began smoothly, "our company faces uncertain times. And while we acknowledge Ms. Carter's majority stake, our duty, your duty, is to ensure competent, experienced leadership moving forward." He motioned toward the screen behind him where the proposed leadership stability provision appeared in bold font. "This provision simply ensures that executive control remains in the hands of those with significant operational experience in aviation. Not tech investors, not activists, but professionals." In the coffee shop across the street, Naomi checked the time. 2 minutes past 9. Her lips tightened. She and Celeste stood. "We go now," Naomi said. "They'll stall, but we can't." Back at the courthouse, Darian Blake was nearly sprinting down the steps. Judge Lucy Chen had ruled decisively. "The restraining order is null and void. Mr. Kingsley's actions constitute fraud upon the court. Ms. Carter's authority is fully restored, but every call he placed failed. Signals jammed, no time left. He flagged a taxi to Apex headquarters now." Inside the shareholder meeting, a staffer approached Graham with a note. "Judge Bancroft has been removed from the case. The restraining order may no longer be valid." Graham's eyes flicked toward the door, but he continued undeterred. "It is the board's prerogative." He insisted to the room, "to protect the company. Let's proceed with the vote." And they began. Downstairs, Naomi and Celeste entered the building, passing security with confident steps. Technically, Naomi was still barred by the previous restraining order unless Jason had succeeded. She held her breath with each step. But when they reached the elevator lobby, 2 guards stepped in front of them. "Apologies, Ms. Carter. You're not permitted upstairs." Celeste raised her voice with calm authority. "The order is invalid. Judge Chen dissolved it 30 minutes ago. You're operating under illegal direction." The guards exchanged glances. "Uncertain." "Call your supervisor," Naomi said firmly, "or escort us upstairs. But understand every minute you delay this. You're complicit." The guards relented. The elevator doors opened. Upstairs, the vote was concluding. All in favor, Graham asked, raising his hand. 7 hands followed. Just enough. All opposed, 5. A murmur spread through the room. Then the doors burst open. Naomi Carter entered, flanked by Celeste and 2 security officers now in full cooperation. Gasps filled the room. "You can't be here," Graham said, visibly rattled. Naomi didn't raise her voice. The restraining order was fraudulent. Judge Chen ruled, "I have full authority. That vote is invalid." She reached into her bag and handed a folder to the legal counsel at the end of the table. Inside is evidence of coordination between Mr. Kingsley and Judge Calvin Bancroft, including a recording of their pretrial conversations, along with internal communications proving intent to deceive shareholders and manipulate company policy. Behind her, Darian Blake appeared, holding up a signed court document, filed and verified. "This meeting is now subject to federal scrutiny." Graham lunged forward. "You don't understand what you're doing." Naomi stared him down. "No, Graham, I understand exactly. You built a system that rewards exclusion, that silences truth, and when it failed, you tried to rewrite the rules." She turned to the shareholders, "But today, we're rewriting them together. Not to preserve power, but to rebuild trust." A moment of silence. Then, Isabella Grant, a major investor, stood. "I move to invalidate the vote and restore Ms. Carter's operational authority." Seconded. Passed. Just like that. Graham's face fell. His power evaporated. Security entered. "Mr. Kingsley, Ms. Bancroft, you're requested to remain for questioning by federal investigators." 2 hours later, Naomi stood at a press podium outside Apex headquarters. Cameras clicked, mics raised. "Today was never just about one flight," she said. "It was about the voices silenced, the lives disrupted, and the dignity denied to countless passengers and employees. But that ends now. We're launching an industry-wide transparency initiative. Every complaint, every outcome, publicly reported. Apex Air will be the first airline where accountability isn't hidden behind PR statements, but lived every day." Behind her, reporters' questions rang out. But one young girl in the crowd, maybe 13, with brown skin and bright eyes, stood out. Her T-shirt read, "Everyone belongs in first class." Naomi smiled at her, because she knew the real change had only just begun. The executive boardroom of Apex Air felt colder than Naomi Carter remembered. Not in temperature, but in energy. The once intimidating space, where dark-paneled walls and hierarchical seating reinforced decades of old guard dominance, was now filled with a tense silence broken only by the soft shuffle of paper and whispered side comments. At the head of the room, Graham Kingsley stood, a familiar confidence in his voice as he attempted to shepherd a vote that would change the company's bylaws. His proposal, a leadership stability provision that would permanently block Naomi from ever exercising operational control, no matter her majority ownership. "This provision," he said smoothly, "is about ensuring stability, about protecting the airline in turbulent times. Our passengers demand experience, not activism." At the back of the room, Celeste Monroe had just entered, slipping into a seat without fanfare. "I believe the majority shareholder might have something to say about that," she announced, cutting into Graham's speech like a blade. Graham barely blinked. "Ms. Carter is still under a court order, and this meeting is well within its rights to proceed in her absence." Outside, Naomi stared at her phone. No message, no word from Darian. Every second mattered. 3 minutes, Celeste had said. If I text proceed, it means the order's been lifted. If not, you don't move. Naomi's fingers hovered over the door handle. At 9:02, she made her decision. She stepped into the building. The legal risk was massive, but the risk of doing nothing even greater. As she neared the boardroom doors, a buzz finally vibrated in her coat pocket. A message from Darian Order lifted. Enter legally. She didn't slow. She pushed open the doors just as Graham Kingsley called for the vote. The room froze. Graham's smile barely masked the panic behind his eyes. Ms. Carter, you are in violation of a legal restraining order. Security will know, Naomi said evenly, holding up her phone. The restraining order has been dissolved. Judge Chen ruled just 30 minutes ago that it was obtained through fraud. And Judge Bancroft, she added, her voice tightening, has recused himself after evidence emerged of improper coordination with you. There was no sound but the soft click of Celeste's pen. Naomi stepped forward, and now, as the majority shareholder of Apex Air, I propose an alternative motion. She connected her tablet to the display and launched into her case this time. Not as a plaintiff, not as an activist outsider, but as the rightful leader of the company. She spoke not just of what happened to her on that flight, but what had been happening at Apex for years. Discrimination complaints ignored, settlements hidden, whistleblowers terminated. She showed excerpts from Evelyn Bancroft's recovered phone documents, memos, voice recordings, evidence of a system carefully designed to suppress accountability. The leadership stability provision isn't about experience, Naomi concluded. It's about protecting power. It's about denying responsibility for decades of harm. Graham's composure cracked. This is a circus. One incident on one flight. It wasn't one incident, came a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned as Lauren Keating stepped into the room. Her posture was stiff, her face pale, but her voice was steady. For 15 years, I was told who to serve and who to delay, who deserved first class and who didn't. The directives came from Mr. Kingsley himself. She took a deep breath. I tried to tell myself I was just following orders, but what we did, it hurt people. And what happened to Naomi wasn't an accident, it was policy. Graham exploded. You ungrateful, he lunged toward her. Security guards, previously still, moved fast, but not toward Naomi, not toward Lauren, toward Graham. They grabbed his arms as his voice turned into a guttural snarl. You think you've won. You've made enemies you can't imagine. This isn't over. They escorted him from the boardroom. Evelyn stood next. Her face remained composed, but her voice trembled beneath the surface. This meeting has been compromised by theatrics. I move to adjourn motion denied. Celeste said flatly, the meeting will proceed with the majority shareholder present. What followed wasn't the vote Graham had called for. It was the vote Naomi called. Motion 1, removal of Graham Kingsley from all corporate positions. Motion 2, dissolution of Evelyn Bancroft's special investment privileges. Motion 3, creation of an independent ethics oversight committee with external investigators and quarterly transparency reporting. The votes were counted. Quietly, deliberately, 64% in favor. A mandate. A turning point. Outside the boardroom, Naomi paused in the hallway. Her hands trembled slightly only now, with the adrenaline fading. Did she feel the weight of it all? Celeste appeared beside her, her eyes tired but bright. "You did it." Naomi shook her head. "We did the first part. Now comes the harder one." Before either could say more, commotion erupted near the lobby. Agents from the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission entered the building. Suits, briefcases, warrant folders. Naomi stepped aside, watching silently as they headed toward the executive offices. The system that had protected Graham for decades was collapsing, not just because of her, but because of everyone who chose to speak, to stand, to act. Lauren, Darian, Celeste, even that young whistleblower from Graham's law firm. Power had shifted, not in one vote or one ruling, but in truth brought to light. Later that day, Naomi stood alone in the new executive suite. It was the same office Graham once occupied, but the atmosphere had changed. The old oil paintings and gold nameplates were gone. A new circular meeting table sat in the center, no head, no hierarchy. Glass walls let light stream in, visible to all. She looked down at her mother's pendant hanging around her neck, then out the window. Far below, planes moved across the tarmac. Passengers, employees, stories, struggles, each one. A reason she had fought. She wasn't here just to lead. She was here to transform. In the heart of Apex Air's redesigned headquarters, the old symbols of hierarchy had been erased. Gone were the long, imposing boardroom tables and private corner offices. In their place stood a circular meeting space where every seat was an architectural metaphor for the company's cultural reset. At the front, large screens displayed real-time operational data. Alongside something entirely new, live discrimination complaint metrics. This radical transparency was no PR stunt. It was the heart of a transformation. Naomi Carter, now firmly in command, stood beside Clarissa Mendez, a former federal prosecutor who had just completed a sweeping 3-week independent investigation. Naomi had commissioned the inquiry immediately after winning back control from Graham Kingsley. "This moment marks a turning point," Naomi said, welcoming a room filled with Apex leadership, employees from every department, and dozens of former passengers and staff who had reported discrimination over the years. Clarissa stepped forward, her tone calm but unflinching. "The findings exceed even our worst expectations." She clicked through her report. In the past 10 years alone, we found 347 documented cases of explicit racial discrimination, most involving passengers of color removed from premium cabins without valid cause. Internal records and statistical patterns suggest thousands more went unreported or were buried. A hush fell over the room. The investigation revealed how flight attendants were given coded training how to judge a passenger's value by skin tone, perceived wealth, and language. Gate agents were directed to double-check the tickets of passengers with ambiguous credentials. Promotions were handed out through a secretive system designed to disadvantage non-white employees by rating cultural fit over merit. Clarissa's voice darkened. Most disturbing is the existence of a secret fund $8 million per year to settle discrimination complaints under airtight NDAs. Most complainants lost their jobs regardless of merit. All roads led back to two people: Evelyn Bancroft, the powerful investor who saw herself as Apex's cultural guardian, had pushed for traditional passenger appeal, a euphemism for prioritizing wealthy white clientele. Graham Kingsley had operationalized it. From Evelyn's recovered phone, Investigators had found voice recordings of Graham instructing department heads to maintain visible demographic balance, a thinly veiled directive to limit black and brown visibility in premium spaces. In legal terms, Clarissa concluded, this constitutes a textbook civil rights conspiracy. She paused. The evidence supports criminal charges not just against the architects Kingsley and Bancroft, but against mid-level managers who enforce these practices knowingly. No one in the room spoke. Naomi let the silence settle. She knew what they were feeling. Relief, shame, rage. For some, it confirmed what they'd suspected. For others, who'd benefited or remained silent, it was a mirror held to complicity. This isn't just Apex's problem, Naomi finally said. Our investigation uncovered similar systems at 6 other major carriers. The same language, the same consultants, the same playbook, on screen. She displayed emails showing Graham and Evelyn discussing passenger compatibility strategies at industry retreats. A policy, once thought unique, was revealed to be a coordinated, cross-airline practice. We're responding accordingly. Naomi continued, effective immediately. All hiring, promotion, and customer service protocols will be audited for disparate impact. Anonymous, independently reviewed complaint channels will be established. Mandatory bias training will be required at all levels. Most significantly, a public dashboard reporting quarterly discrimination statistics will be launched, unprecedented in the airline industry. As implementation discussions began, Naomi's legal team received breaking news federal prosecutors had filed criminal charges against Graham Kingsley and Evelyn Bancroft, civil rights conspiracy, wire fraud related to the hidden settlements, and securities violations for misrepresenting corporate culture to investors. For many employees who had endured the old regime, the indictments felt like long overdue justice. For others who'd looked the other way, they triggered a new fear exposure. Later that day, Naomi received an unexpected request. Lauren Keating, the former flight attendant whose testimony had shifted the shareholder vote, asked for a private meeting. Since her public reversal and candid confession, Lauren had been placed on administrative leave, her future uncertain. Now, sitting across from Naomi in a glass-walled meeting room, she looked subdued but resolute. I know I don't deserve a second chance, she began. What I did hurt people, including you. There's no excuse. You're right, Naomi replied, her tone direct but not cruel. You enforced racist policies. You removed passengers based on race, including me. Lauren nodded. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking to help fix what I broke. She leaned forward. I know the system, the codes, the phrasing, how it was framed as customer service. If we're serious about reform, someone needs to show how it worked. Naomi considered her carefully. The offer was surprising, but it wasn't without merit. You'd work in an advisory-only role to the Ethics Oversight Committee, Naomi said. No contact with passengers, no supervisory authority. You'll speak publicly about your role honestly and accept the limitations of that. Lauren agreed instantly. As that conversation ended, another unfolded across the country in a federal courtroom. Graham Kingsley arrived for arraignment, flanked by attorneys and reporters. His signature confidence was gone. Evelyn Bancroft stood beside him, stoic as always. But her composure had a hollow edge now. Graham's legal strategy emerged quickly. Blame Lauren, portray her as a rogue flight attendant, claim Evelyn's records were misinterpreted, call Naomi an inexperienced investor on a witch hunt. The strategy fell apart almost immediately. Dozens of former Apex employees had come forward: pilots, mechanics, former HR managers. Each story added weight to a pattern of systemic discrimination, even more devastating. 3 senior executives had accepted immunity deals. Their testimony placed Graham at the center of every discriminatory decision. Evelyn, pragmatic as ever, began secret talks with prosecutors, trading information about similar systems at other airlines in exchange for leniency. Back at Apex, Naomi faced a new dilemma. The Department of Justice asked her to cooperate in building cases against the other airlines implicated by Evelyn's files, but she hesitated. Becoming a government informant risked business retaliation. In a strategy meeting, her team debated the ethics of staying quiet. "We have no legal obligation to report on competitors," said Martin Chen, Apex's new general counsel, but ethically countered Amara Rhodes, head of passenger advocacy. "If we know this is systemic and stay silent, we're just like them." It was Celeste Monroe, as always, who found a path forward. "We form an industry consortium," she proposed. "We share our reforms, our data, our standards publicly. Let other airlines choose to join or explain why they won't." Naomi agreed immediately. Across town, as federal agents prepared indictments, the media descended on Graham's trial. His carefully crafted legacy collapsed, exposed by his own voice, his own policies, and a young woman who refused to move seats. For Naomi, the battle was no longer about ownership or image. It was about accountability, and it was far from over. Through her attorneys, Evelyn Bancroft began quiet negotiations with federal prosecutors. In public, she remained loyal to Graham Kingsley, projecting unity. But behind closed doors, she offered names, files, and pathways into an industry-wide network of discriminatory practices. Her survival instincts had kicked in. Cooperation could buy her leniency. This put Naomi Carter in a delicate position. The Department of Justice approached Apex Air with a request to assist in prosecuting other airlines. Naomi understood the weight of what they were asking. On paper, it was a simple decision: provide evidence and help dismantle a system she'd fought so hard against. But practically, it meant alienating powerful competitors, risking contracts, becoming the face not just of reform, but of retribution. Her leadership team, now a blend of seasoned veterans and emerging talent, gathered to discuss the dilemma. "Legally, we don't have to participate," said Martin Chen, the new chief legal officer. "We've done our part. Apex is no longer under investigation." But ethically countered Amara Rhodes, leading the newly created Passenger Advocacy Division. "If we know other carriers are still doing this and we stay silent, we're just putting a fresh coat of paint on the same broken foundation." The room quieted until Celeste Monroe broke the silence with her trademark grace. "Then we don't point fingers, we raise the standard. Let's build a consortium, a voluntary coalition of airlines committed to transparency, fair treatment, and measurable reform." She paused and let the public ask why others won't join. It was classic Celeste strategic pressure without open confrontation. Naomi nodded. "Let's do it." The United Alliance for Ethical Aviation was born. While legal teams refined the model, Naomi dealt with an invisible weight. Despite everything she'd achieved reclaiming Apex, exposing a conspiracy, and pushing industry reform, she couldn't shake the loneliness. The threats, the headlines, the expectation to lead flawlessly, had left scars no court ruling could erase. David Trenton, her lead attorney, and by now close confidant, noticed the change in her during a quiet evening prep session. "You've accomplished more in a month than most CEOs do in 5 years," he said gently. "Why don't you look like someone who just won?" Naomi paused, tired eyes meeting his. "Because I didn't just want to win. I wanted to change things. And sometimes it feels like the system just absorbs change until it doesn't matter anymore." David nodded. "Change takes time, but you've made them show who they really are. That doesn't go away." They were interrupted by a flood of notifications. Breaking news: Graham Kingsley had suffered a medical episode in court. Early reports described it as a stress-induced cardiac event. Not fatal, but serious. And, just like that, the headlines shifted from systemic abuse to personal tragedy. "Unbelievable," Naomi muttered as the media pivoted. "They're already writing his redemption arc." Refusing to let the narrative slip, Naomi called a press conference, under a backdrop of Apex Air's new slogan, Equity. In every altitude, she addressed reporters calmly and without bitterness. "This isn't about one man's health," she said. "It's about years of policies that harmed people who didn't have power, and those systems are what we're focused on fixing." She walked through the reforms already in place: new hiring audits, blind promotion evaluations, independent complaint review. Data showed employee satisfaction climbing steadily, particularly among groups historically marginalized in airline employment. And for shareholders who had once doubted her leadership, a surprise awaited. After an initial slump, Apex stock had not only recovered, was outperforming its 5-year average. Media outlets who once questioned her activist agenda now ran stories praising the Naomi effect. The final confirmation of her impact came not from Wall Street, but from the DOJ. Naomi was invited to preview the full criminal case against Graham and Evelyn. The scope had expanded. Hundreds of testimonies, years of internal documents, and financial records painted a clear picture of conspiracy, fraud, and deliberate targeting of passengers based on race and appearance. New charges included civil rights conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, securities fraud. Each charge carried a potential sentence. Together, they represented the dismantling of not just 2 careers, but a culture. As Naomi left the courthouse, she unexpectedly crossed paths with Evelyn Bancroft. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. One woman had orchestrated decades of exclusion in the pursuit of profit. The other had exposed it not for revenge, but for restoration. Their eyes met. Evelyn's held no remorse-only calculation. Her cooperation wasn't about guilt. It was survival. Naomi turned away. She had nothing to prove. Back at Apex, final preparations were underway for a live stream that would reach every employee from pilots in Denver to ticket agents in Atlanta. For the first time in the company's history, the full results of an internal investigation would be made public. No spin, no redaction. Naomi stepped into the studio, heart steady. This company betrayed its promise to the people who worked here and the people who flew with us. But we are not defined by our past. We are defined by how we respond to it. Screens across the country lit up with her words. What had started with one young black woman being asked to move out of first class now stood as a turning point in how corporate America defined leadership, accountability, and justice. But Naomi Carter wasn't here for symbolism. She was here for change, and she was just getting started. Naomi Carter stood at the center of a transformed Apex Air. Her decision to share the full extent of the company's discriminatory past with employees and the public was not without risk. Many on the board feared it would damage morale, or worse, cripple the company's image beyond repair. But Naomi knew the truth. Silence was complicity. "We can't rebuild while pretending the damage was accidental," she told the board earlier. "Everyone deserves to know exactly how it happened so we never go back." At 9:00 a.m. sharp, thousands of Apex employees logged into a secure company-wide stream. In the executive auditorium, every seat was filled. Naomi stepped up to the podium with no branding behind Heronly Truth. She didn't start with slogans. She began with the evidence. An internal memo titled Passenger Aesthetic Optimization appeared on screen language used to justify targeting non-white passengers for downgraded treatment in premium cabins. Audio clips followed Graham Kingsley's voice giving directives to maintain cultural consistency in first class. Then, a transcript of Evelyn Bancroft explaining how gate agents should identify low-value travelers based on name and appearance. By the time Naomi displayed data showing racial bias embedded in performance reviews and promotion decisions, the room was still. Some employees stared, wide-eyed, others averted their eyes, but no one could deny what they saw. This wasn't accidental, Naomi said evenly. It was policy. It was taught. It was enforced. And it hurt real people. She paused, scanning the room. Many of you suffered under this. Others didn't speak up because you didn't know how or because you were afraid. Today, we begin something different. Her voice never cracked, but her words carried weight. Carlos Rivera, the flight attendant who had defended Naomi on that now infamous flight, stood to speak. "How do we fix this?" he asked. "How do we rebuild trust with passengers who were hurt by these policies?" Naomi's answer was steady. "Not with empty apologies," she said, "with truth, with action, with real change." She outlined the restitution plan for passengers affected by prior discrimination, including free lifetime loyalty status, written apologies, and a public archive of past policies. She then announced Apex's partnership with civil rights organizations to develop fair service guidelines industry-wide. The Q&A went on for hours. Employees, from baggage handlers to senior managers, asked hard questions, shared stories, even cried. What had begun as a presentation became a reckoning. Meanwhile, across the city, Graham Kingsley sat before a federal judge. He looked diminished, thinner, paler, less like the executive titan he had once been, and more like a man watching everything unravel. The prosecutors played the tapes, his own voice, calm and rehearsed, given step-by-step instructions on how to eject non-white passengers without sparking lawsuits, how to mark whistleblowers for performance remediation, how to bury complaints with settlements and silence. When the judge asked how he pled, there was no fanfare, just a pause, a glance to his lawyers, guilty. The courtroom held its breath. Reporters scribbled furiously. Behind them, former Apex employees who had filed complaints over the years sat in quiet vindication. Graham Kingsley's plea deal would reduce his sentence, but not erase it. He had agreed to testify against other executives across the airline industry. For Naomi, the admission wasn't personal victory. It was historical record. Later that evening, in her newly redesigned office glass walls, natural light, reclaimed wood where once there had been mahogany, and leather, Naomi sat with Celeste Monroe, sipping tea as the weight of the day settled over them. "You did something extraordinary," Celeste said, but I know it doesn't feel like a celebration." Naomi gave a tired smile. "Because it's not. Not yet. We brought down one man, but the system that protected him is still out there, in boardrooms, in agencies, in other airlines." Celeste nodded. "Which means we keep going, one company at a time, one policy at a time, until the system has no place left to hide." Just then, Naomi's phone buzzed. "Breaking news: DOJ opens formal investigation into 3 additional U.S. airlines following evidence uncovered in Apex probe." The story was no longer just about Apex Air. Naomi's decision to tell the whole truth had triggered a seismic shift. Other CEOs were already scrambling. Other executives were calling their legal teams. The ripple effect had begun. Naomi didn't smile, but she felt a weight shift, not lifted but moving. Finally, in the right direction. That night, she recorded a short video message for Apex's employees and customers. No music, no polish, just her. "This isn't the end of something," she said. "It's the start. The start of a new way of flying, a new way of leading, and a new way of treating every human being with dignity." The message went viral, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The conspiracy Graham Kingsley and Evelyn Bancroft had carefully constructed over decades spanning boardrooms, regulatory circles, and quiet political deals was unraveling in real time. What had begun with one teenage girl refusing to leave her rightful seat had sparked a reckoning that now stretched across the entire aviation industry. Naomi Carter knew the fight wasn't over. The next day would bring congressional hearings, new policies, and more difficult conversations. But that night, she allowed herself a rare breath in acknowledgement of what had been achieved. Change was no longer a distant ideal. It was happening. 1 month after Graham Kingsley pleaded guilty, Apex Air hosted an unprecedented gathering in its corporate ballroom. This space, once reserved for VIP clients and power brokers, was now filled with former employees, many of whom had been pushed out of the company for the same reason Naomi had nearly been the color of their skin. They were pilots who'd been overlooked for years, gate agents disciplined for speaking in their native tongues, cabin crew dismissed over customer comfort concerns that were never truly about comfort. Now, for the first time, they were heard. Naomi didn't stand at the front. She and Celeste Monroe sat among the crowd, listening. This wasn't about reclaiming power. It was about restoring dignity. Carlos Rivera, now Director of Inclusion and Equity, opened the formal ceremony with quiet resolve. "Today is not about corporate PR," he said. "It's about acknowledging harm, issuing justice, and rebuilding this company from the ground up." Then came the remediation program, a sweeping, historic effort. Reinstatement with full seniority and back pay. Career development tracks for those whose growth had been blocked. Personalized letters of apology, not from a legal department, but from the executive office. And most significantly, a civilian-led ethics oversight board with the power to overrule executive decisions related to discrimination. Jason Miller, the civil rights attorney who had once handed Naomi his business card on a flight, now helped oversee the board's legal architecture. "This is a reversal of decades of silencing," he said. "Apex Air isn't just apologizing. It's empowering the people it once pushed out, operationally." Apex Air began to transform just as dramatically. The covert passenger profiling protocols were dismantled and replaced with uniform service standards. Hiring and promotions now prioritized metrics over executive presence. a euphemism long used to justify discrimination. Customer service training now included mandatory anti-bias education, including the psychological cost of microaggressions on both passengers and staff. Marketing campaigns shifted too. No more curated images of white executives in luxury cabins. Apex new materials featured families of all backgrounds, staff members of all races, and a deliberate focus on inclusivity not as branding, but as belonging. And the changes were working. Within 3 months, employee satisfaction among minority groups rose by 61%. Discrimination complaints dropped by 70%. Flight bookings stabilized, and Apex's stock price recovered, contrary to every pundit's prediction. Some resisted. A handful of executives resigned. A few frequent flyers cut ties, citing discomfort with politics in the sky. Naomi expected that. She didn't need every passenger to agree only for every employee and customer to be treated with fairness and dignity. But the most contentious moment came when Lauren Keating, the former flight attendant whose actions had catalyzed the public scandals, spoke at an industry event as a now reformed member of Apex Ethics Board. Her voice didn't shake. We were trained to remove black and brown passengers using phrases like cabin balance or passenger compatibility, she said to a silent room of industry professionals. It wasn't subtle. It was strategic. It wasn't racism by accident. It was discrimination by design. The room erupted. Some attendees walked out. Others shouted objections. And before the day ended, the rest of the conference was canceled under a vague scheduling conflict. But it was too late. The recording of Lauren's testimony had already gone viral across the country. Other airline employees came forward. Stories poured in. Investigations expanded. Federal probes revealed similar systems in place at 3 other major carriers, echoing the policies Apex had exposed. It became clear what happened at Apex wasn't an anomaly. It was a blueprint followed across the industry, and now the blueprint was burning. Back at Apex headquarters, Naomi faced a new challenge managing a company while leading an industry-wide reckoning. Some days were harder than others. The emotional toll of navigating endless scrutiny, high expectations, and the moral weight of leadership was immense. And in the quiet moments, she sometimes wondered if it would ever be enough. That's when Jason Miller reminded her Graham and Evelyn built their empire on secrecy. He said, "You're building yours on sunlight." She didn't need applause. She needed results, and results were coming. As Graham Kingsley prepared to testify against his former allies, his legacy forever rewritten as the architect of a civil rights conspiracy. Naomi Carter prepared her next initiative, a voluntary transparency consortium, inviting all airlines to share their internal discrimination data. "Join us," the message said, "or explain to the public why you won't." It was a masterstroke one Celeste Monroe called pure accountability, wrapped in opportunity, for passengers, for staff, for the industry, one company at a time, one system at a time, one truth at a time. And it had all started because a 19-year-old black woman refused to leave her seat in first class. Naomi Carter sat in the hearing chamber of the Congressional Transportation Committee, flanked by airline executives who offered familiar platitudes. "We're reviewing internal processes. We take diversity seriously. We're exploring new training modules." Naomi, as always, was different. She didn't deliver talking points. She delivered truth. This isn't about isolated bad actors or unconscious bias. She began clearly. It's about deliberate structures policies designed to appear neutral while producing consistently discriminatory outcomes. Until we change those structures, nothing else matters. The contrast between Naomi's bold specificity and the evasiveness of other industry leaders went viral within hours. Across social platforms, the hashtag #Apex Standard trended as viewers lauded her courage to name what others wouldn't. While Naomi testified, back at Apex Air headquarters, employees gathered in a converted conference room to watch Graham Kingsley's sentencing unfold via live stream. The once untouchable CEO, who had orchestrated decades of covert discrimination, stood to face justice. 12 years in federal prison for civil rights violations, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. Judge Clarice Edmonds did not mince words. These were not impulsive missteps. This was a deliberate architecture of exclusion, enforced through intimidation and lies, all under the pretense of corporate stewardship. The court finds this conduct not just illegal, but morally corrosive. Beside him, Evelyn Bancroft, the calculating investor who had helped codify the company's discriminatory blueprint, received 5 years, though she'd cooperated late in the investigation. The court also ordered $18 million in disgorgement, recognizing profits gained from civil rights abuses, but Naomi made sure Apex's transformation wasn't lost in the shadow of those legal consequences. While Graham and Evelyn entered prison, Apex threw open house tours. They welcomed press, civil rights organizations, and the public into training facilities and employee spaces. They showed everything, nothing hidden. Most impactful was Apex's Transparency Initiative quarterly public reports on every discrimination complaint, how it was investigated, and how it was resolved. Initially, analysts scoffed. "You'll scare away investors," they said. "Admitting fault is suicide." But Naomi had always understood something Wall Street rarely did. Accountability breeds loyalty. Customer trust rebounded. So did employee morale. Even investor confidence returned as the company's ethics translated to real revenue through returning customers and higher workforce retention. Still, the most powerful moment came not in a courtroom or boardroom, but in a quiet, public-facing broadcast between two women. Naomi sat across from Lauren Keating, the former flight attendant whose attempt to remove her from first class had lit the match. "I'm not here to shame you," Naomi began. "What happened on that flight was the result of a system that taught you to see passengers like me as problems. That system didn't begin with you, but it ended with us. Lauren didn't deflect. She didn't offer excuses. I chose compliance over conscience," she said softly. "Not once, repeatedly. That was my decision, and this is my chance to make it right." Their exchange became a national moment, not because it was sensational, but because it was human. Not absolution, not vengeance, but accountability with dignity. It shifted the conversation across industries. How do we talk about complicity without collapsing into guilt or deflection? How do we build systems that prevent harm, not just apologize after it? These questions echoed through every hallway of Apex Air's newly reopened headquarters, a space now defined by glass walls, open meeting circles, and adaptive design built for accessibility, not hierarchy. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Naomi addressed the crowd. "Transformation isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process. We've dismantled discriminatory systems, but maintaining change requires vigilance, humility, and courage." She smiled at the room board members, flight attendants, maintenance workers, disability advocates, and community leaders. All equals now. I owned 51% of Apex Air. That gave me power. But most people harmed by discrimination don't own the companies that discriminate against them. That's why our mission must extend beyond this airline. And it had. The Equitable Aviation Alliance, the brainchild of Celeste Monroe, had evolved from a skeptical proposal into a national force. 5 major airlines had joined, each agreeing to public complaint tracking, demographic audits, and external ethics boards. This consortium created industry-wide benchmarking. Customers could now compare airlines based not just on price and comfort, but on equity, accountability, and how well they served all passengers. There were critics, of course. Conservative outlets claimed DEI was destroying service culture. Old guard CEOs warned of politics in the skies, but none of them could argue with the data. Employee satisfaction had never been higher at Apex. Discrimination claims were down 70%. Revenue had stabilized. The sky was falling. Narrative had crashed into a new reality. Equality works. In one of her final meetings before a short break, her first real vacation in over a year, Naomi met with a group of high school students visiting as part of Apex's new youth leadership initiative. A girl about 16, dark skin and tight curls not unlike Naomi's, raised her hand nervously. "Were you scared?" Naomi didn't hesitate. Terrified. "There were days I thought I'd lose everything. My name, my company, my voice. But I remembered something my mother said to me once. If the system is afraid of your truth, you're probably telling the right one." She paused. Courage isn't about never feeling fear. It's about knowing your fear is less important than the people who come after you. Naomi Carter stood beside Celeste Monroe, watching the last of the evening sunlight spill across the gleaming atrium of Apex Air's newly reopened headquarters. Just beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the courtyard buzzed with employees, community leaders, and media guests mingling freely in a space that had once been sealed off for only the most elite executives. The contrast with the company's former self was staggering. "Did you ever imagine we'd get here?" Naomi asked quietly, a trace of wonder in her voice. "When you found me at that science fair, just a kid with code and ambition, did any of this even cross your mind?" Celeste smiled, her eyes scanning the transformed surroundings. "Your mind was always sharp, but this." She gestured toward the laughter, the conversations, the lightness that filled the building. "This exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. You've made something no algorithm could ever model." Their conversation was interrupted by Carlos Rivera, now leading Apex's flourishing diversity and inclusion department with the kind of confidence he once only dared whisper about. "The quarterly report's out," he said with a proud grin. "Record-breaking numbers. We've hit an all-time high on stock value and employee engagement." Naomi smiled. "So it's official." Carlos nodded. "Turns out, equity's good for business." The numbers backed it up. Employee productivity had surged. Customer loyalty was up. Lawsuits and legal risks had plummeted. The same airline that many predicted would collapse under Naomi's inexperience had not only survived, it had soared. As the reopening celebration reached its crescendo, Naomi looked around, thinking back to that humiliating moment when she'd been told to move out of first class. She hadn't been the first, she wouldn't be the last, but she had been in a position to do something about it, and she had. That realization fueled her next move. The following week, Naomi announced the creation of the Apex Justice Fund, a $50 million initiative designed to support individuals fighting discrimination across the entire transportation industry. The fund would provide legal resources, career rehabilitation, and public advocacy to those who, like her, had faced bias without the safety net of ownership or power. "We're not just building one ethical company," she said at the press conference. "We're building a movement." That movement had already begun to take form. Later that night, Naomi stood alone in the redesigned Apex boardroom. The imposing mahogany table was gone, replaced by a circular layout that symbolized equal voice. Art from employees across departments lined the walls, telling stories of resilience and transformation. A digital dashboard on one wall showed both Apex's real-time financials and a bold new metric equity index, a live pulse of progress in hiring, advancement, and customer satisfaction across demographic lines. At the center of it all, the company's new slogan glowed brightly: "Everyone belongs in first class." The phrase wasn't just about seating, it was about dignity, visibility, access, fairness. It was about rewriting the silent rules that had once kept people like Naomi and her parents out of spaces they had earned the right to occupy. As Naomi touched the small gold pendant she still wore her mother's, she allowed herself a rare moment of quiet pride. The airline that had once humiliated her family now stood as a global example of inclusion and justice. But the work wasn't over. The Apex Justice Fund had already received hundreds of applications. The Equitable Aviation Alliance, first proposed by Celeste, had expanded rapidly. 5 major airlines now participated, shared metrics, transparent complaint channels, independent review boards. The accountability was real and spreading, and there was more ahead. Apex Air had begun development of bias detection AI tools for crew scheduling and passenger experience, hoping to license them industry-wide. Other sectors, rideshare, hospitality, rail, had begun requesting consultations. Change was in the air, and Naomi's team had become the blueprint. As the room emptied, Naomi turned to Celeste, who joined her with 2 mugs of tea. "You've done something incredible," Celeste said quietly, "but I need to ask what now." Naomi didn't hesitate. "Now we scale, we expand. We teach others how to dismantle systems like the one we inherited, and we remind them that justice isn't a gesture, it's a structure." The next morning, Naomi joined a national broadcast, sitting beside Lauren Keating, the former flight attendant whose actions had once triggered a media storm. Their conversation wasn't about blame, it was about systems, choices, redemption. "I could say I didn't know what I was doing," Lauren said on air, "but that would be a lie. I knew. I just didn't think anyone would ever hold us accountable." Naomi replied gently, "You weren't alone in that. None of this was about one person. It never is. But change begins when we stop pretending and start rebuilding." The broadcast resonated deeply across the country. For many, it was their first glimpse at what corporate accountability looked like when paired with compassion. Not shame, not silence, but truth, and the will to do better. 6 months after that fateful flight, Apex Air hosted a public ceremony marking the end of its internal overhaul and the beginning of a new era. The redesigned headquarters, with its accessible, light-filled architecture, now welcomed community groups, passenger advocates, and students as regular collaborators. Naomi stood at the podium, flanked by engineers, pilots, HR managers, janitorial staff, and flight attendants, all co-authors of this new chapter. Transformation isn't a one-time decision. She said, it's a habit, it's a system, it's a promise. She paused, the crowd hanging on her words. Every policy we write, every person we hire, every decision we make, they will all answer one question: does everyone belong? And if the answer isn't yes, we change the policy. We change the system. We change the standard. The audience rose to their feet, not with applause but with shared resolve. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new model, a new standard, one that proved ethics and excellence weren't rivals, they were partners. If Naomi Carter's journey moved you, if you believe that fighting injustice begins with telling the truth, comment "belong" below. Share your own story. Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong? What changed when you found your voice? And if you believe that accountability, equity, and empathy belong at the heart of every industry, subscribe. We'll keep telling the stories that matter, because justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when someone, like Naomi, says, "No, I won't move," and everything changes. It began with a stolen seat. It ended with the fall of an empire and the rise of a movement. Naomi Carter's story isn't just about what happened to her on one flight. It's about what happens when people in power use systems, policies, procedures, politics to quietly push others out. It's about the quiet cruelty of being told, "You don't belong here," not with words, but with actions dressed up as rules. And it's about what can happen when someone fights back, not with rage, but with reason, not with chaos, but with clarity. Naomi didn't just expose one act of discrimination. She tore open the carefully sealed lid of an entire industry, revealing how exclusion had been systemized, funded, and hidden for years. And then she built something better. She didn't settle for apologies. She demanded accountability. She didn't just win in courtrooms or boardrooms. She won in hearts and headlines, by listening, by leading, by refusing to be erased. From fired employees rehired with back pay, to boardrooms redesigned for inclusion, to justice funds for victims across the entire transportation industry, this story became bigger than Naomi. It became a blueprint for real change. And perhaps most powerful of all, she proved that ethics and excellence aren't opposites. That doing the right thing isn't just good morality, it's good business. But what about you? What would you do if you were told you didn't belong when you knew you did? Have you ever been passed over, pushed back, or silenced just because someone couldn't see your worth? Naomi's journey reminds us, you don't have to be a CEO to make change. You just have to be the one who won't move. If this story inspired you, share it, talk about it. Because someone out there right now is sitting in a seat they were told not to take. And your voice might be the one that tells them they belong. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that show what's possible when we stop asking for permission and start rewriting the rules. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.